My people suffer from a lack of knowledge, and the majority of the ones that do know don't want to share with the community. And that makes them a house Negro. Don't want another to grow. Some of us went from Negro to no growth, and that's sad. But I have some great news for you, and let's hear it.
You're Cuban. Like,
I'm black first.
Yeah.
I'm black first.
But
Well, I always tell people,
how you identify
but
yourself.
are you full Cuban? I'm full Cuban. I thought he was black too.
I know.
But I am black.
I gotta repeat this.
Like,
I'm black first.
Yeah.
I'm black first.
Well,
I always tell people,
how you identify
but
yourself.
are you full Cuban? I'm full Cuban. I thought he was black too.
I know.
But I am black.
No,
I am
here's
black.
it. Everyone thinks that you are like
Okay,
the black lineage.
all right, so
you know, like,
let me explain how it works. You know, this is another thing that I feel like we as black people get caught up in, that separates us as opposed to uniting us. We get caught up in where the ship dropped us off versus where the ship picked us up. You know what I'm saying? We all come from the same root. It's just a tree with different branches. The same boat that picked up your ancestors picked up my ancestors. Only they dropped yours off here. They made a pit stop in the Caribbean and dropped mine off. But my ancestors still dealt with slavery. You know, still dealt with being, you know, having their family and their lives ripped from them, and having to come back from colonialism and slavery. You know, so, and it's not just African Americans, it's Afro-Cubans, it's Afro-Dominicans, it's Afro-Puerto Ricans. Like, all these people got to get out of their colonialized minds and stop thinking, oh, I'm not this, I'm this. Okay, yeah, you can be Latin, but you're black first.
And the separatism that takes us apart when we all have the same struggle. And we all
100%. Because when I walk into a room, they ain't thinking, oh, we're going to give him a pass because he's Latin. Yeah. Or if a cop pulls me over, he's not like, oh, okay, I'm not going to shoot him or I'm not going to beat his ass because he's Cuban. No, I'm black. You know what I'm saying? And I'm dealing with the same.
There it is. In a nutshell, most people focusing on where they dropped us off instead of where they picked us up. From Shalom to King Kong, on my way to Hong Kong, we are all part of the same tree of which the roots tell thee, but some of the branches break off the tree and claim ignorance, indifference, acting up with belligerence. Luckily, though, some of us are acting with immense inner sense, which dictates the knowledge of inner self. I hope you can understand what I'm talking about with that, but if you don't, that's all right. I'm gonna keep coming at you. On to the timeline, 1601, 1620. The Pilgrims reach New England, colonial Massachusetts. 1624, the first African-American child born free in the English colonies, William Tucker, is baptized in Virginia. 17th century black religion, colonial America, Virginia. 1624, the first enslaved Africans arrive in the Dutch colony of New Amsterdam, now New York City, with the Dutch West India Company. They quickly become the city's first municipal labor force, clearing land of timber, cutting lumber, cultivating crops, and so on and so on. And you know they didn't get paid. Colonial slavery, colonial America, New York. 1629, the first enslaved Africans arrived in what is now Connecticut. Colonial slavery, colonial America, Connecticut. 1634, slavery is introduced in Maryland. Colonial slavery, colonial America, Maryland. 1636, Dutch minister Bogatus summons a teacher from Holland to Manhattan Island to provide more religious training to Dutch and African children. This is the first example of educational efforts in colonial North America which are directed toward persons, and it cuts off, but I will say persons of color. Black education, United States, New York. 1641, Massachusetts explicitly permits slavery of Indians. Slave laws, colonial America, Massachusetts, 1641. Now remember, before they came there, the Indians were living there free. And before the Indians, probably people like me. Now I want to repeat that. Massachusetts explicitly permits slavery of Indians, whites, and Negroes in its body of liberties. It is the first mainland British colony to legalize slavery. I say it again, slave laws, colonial America, and Massachusetts. 1641, Matthias de Sousa, an African indentured servant who came from England with Lord Baltimore, is elected to Maryland's General Assembly. Black politics, colonial America, Maryland. 1642, Virginia passes a fugitive slave law. Offenders helping runaway slaves are fined in pounds of tobacco. An enslaved person is to be branded with a large R after a second escape attempt. These are slave laws in colonial America and Virginia. 1643, the New England Confederation reaches an agreement that makes the signature of a magistrate sufficient evidence to re-enslave a suspected fugitive slave. Slave laws, colonial America, New Hampshire. The signature of a magistrate is sufficient to re-enslave a suspected fugitive slave. 1645, merchant ships from Barbados arrive in Boston, where they trade their cargoes of enslaved Africans for sugar and tobacco. The profitability of this exchange encourages the slave trade in New England. Colonial slavery, colonial America, Massachusetts. I say again, 1645, merchant ships from Barbados arrive in Boston, where they trade their cargo of enslaved Africans for sugar and tobacco. The profitability of this exchange encourages the slave trade in New England. 1645, the Dutch colonists transferred some of their land holdings in New Amsterdam, New York City, to their former enslaved Africans as their compensation for their support in battles with the Native Americans. A condition of the land transfer, however, is the guarantee of a specified amount. And they don't say what it is, but I would say amount of profits. They don't do anything for nothing. Slavers. Emancipation. Colonial America. New York. 1650. Connecticut legalizes slavery. Rhode Island, by this date, has large plantations worked by enslaved Africans. Slave laws. Colonial America. Connecticut. And today, I will end it right here, starting tomorrow, hopefully, with 1650. Stop focusing on where the slave ships dropped us off, and remember where the slave ships picked us up from. We are all one of the same tree. We are all branches. Some of us are roots. Some of us go deep into the earth. And that black, some of us are the parents of civilization.